I have an adult son who has Down syndrome. I naturally have strong bonds of love for him, having had custody and care of him and all his special needs since his birth. He lives in a group home where he's happy and there's wonderful staff. However, due to poor management, he is in danger of losing those who, along with his mom and me, are his security and almost his whole world, which is utterly small. His whole life is dependent on the goodwill of others, and I'm deeply concerned by what is happening around him now. We have always had to act and fight for his well-being and his rights. Now it has come to a head, and there are great risks to his health and well-being. Now we are forced to fight again. I have to talk, explain, and write to administrators and politicians. I have to use my mind for the fighting. My mind is a maelstrom of thoughts and emotions. I'm unable to perform ātma-vicāra. My body is exhausted. My muscles are tense, and anxiety is preventing me from sleeping. I try to give up and think of concepts like trust in God, let God do the thinking, but soon thoughts and anxieties overwhelm me again. I have tried watching my breath and doing mantra japa, also with the japamala, but these don't even give me momentary rest. I'm unable to find a way to calm down. The only thing that makes me still for a while is the prayer, thy will be done. My question is, how can we practice surrender when we need it most? Can you give us some practical advice that we can use in everyday life during a crisis?
Well, first, I'm very sorry to hear about the condition of your son. I had an aunt who was similar. She was lived all her life in care homes, and she was taken care of, but sometimes there were problems in the care home, and for some funding problems or something, and they had to. Whenever there was any change in her environment, whenever her carers changed, it was a big turmoil for her. So I very much sympathize with what you're going through. However, Bhagavan has a plan for all of us. Sometimes we all face difficulties in life. But sometimes out of those difficulties, some good will come. So we should never lose hope. Sometimes when things seem bleakest, other times but bring forth the best solutions. Regarding your problem, the problem of dealing with your own mind, we all have to deal with our mind. I mean, the mind is the obstacle we all face in following this path, because we have strong Vishaya vasanas, and under the sway of these Vishaya vasanas, we tend to go outwards and get agitated and all these things. The only way to overcome these is patient and persistent abhyasa. Sometimes it may seem, when we're facing particular difficulties, particularly intense difficulties like you're facing now in your life, it may seem the time when it's most difficult or even impossible to practice ātma-vicāra. Still, we should keep on trying, because there's no other solution. This is the only way. And surrender to Bhagavan and ātma-vicāra are not two different things. Bhagavan has clearly defined in the 13th paragraph of Nana what it means to give ourselves wholly to God. He says, Anma chintane tavira vera chintane kalambuvitaku satram idum kodamul apmanishta paranai iripade tannai isanaku alepadam. That apmanishta paranai iripade tannai isanaku alepadam means being as Atmanishta Paran is giving oneself to God, alone is giving oneself to God. Being as Atmanishta Paran means being one who is firmly established as oneself. In other words, being as we actually are. being as we actually are means not rising as ego. How to avoid rising as ego is what he indicates in the first clause of the sentence. Ātma-vicāra tavira, vera chintane kalamradriku satram idam kadamo. Not giving even the slightest room to the rising of any thought other than the thought of oneself. Thought of oneself means self-attentiveness. In other words, being so keenly self-attentive that we give no room to the rising of any other thought. When no other thoughts rise, that is, whenever ego rises, it rises along with other thoughts. So whenever other thoughts don't rise, ego also doesn't rise. So it means being as we actually are without rising as ego. This is what we're aiming for. We all fail in our attempts to be as we actually are, but just because we fail, we shouldn't give up, because we never really fail. The very fact that we are failing, we wouldn't fail if we didn't try. So if we feel that we're failing, at least we know we're trying. So keep on trying. We will sooner or later succeed. As far as the external difficulties are concerned, Bhagavan says in the next sentence of that same paragraph, however much burden is placed on God, he will bear all of it. So even the burden of thinking, we should surrender that burden to him. We may not be able to, we may want to, but find that we're unable to, but we should try to, by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness. So there's no easy way out. We simply have to patiently and persistently try to be self-attentive as much as possible. This is the only way. All these other things, japa and prayer and all these things, these are all supportive, but none of them in their efficacy is far, far, far less than the efficacy of being self-attentive. So even if we're only able to be self-attentive for a moment here and a moment there, that has greater efficacy than any amount of other sadhanas. Because other sadhanas, for example, if we fix our name on our mind on the name of God, that prevents our mind going after other things. So we weaken the Vishaya Vasana. That's how the mind is purified by bhakti. But we are still clinging to something other than ourselves. So still the mind is free to go outwards, even if only to the name of God. But what is the real nature of God? God is, so long as our mind is going outwards, God may appear in name and form. But ultimately, what God actually is our own being. So as Bhagavan says in verses 8 and 9 of Upadesha Undiyar, in verse 8 he says, rather than Anya-bhava means meditation on what is other. In the context, it implies meditating on God as if God is something other than ourselves. In other words, meditating on a name or form of God. Rather than that, Ananya-bhava, that means meditating on what is not other, meditating on ourself alone, with the understanding he is I. He doesn't literally say with the understanding, he says Ananya-bhava, in which he is I. That implies meditating on nothing other than ourselves with the understanding that he is I. So we're meditating on nothing other than I. That is anatinam uttamam. That is best among all. In the context, best among all means that is the most effective means to purify the mind. And it's not only the most effective means to purify the mind, it's also the only means to destroy the mind ultimately. Then in the next verse, verse 9, he goes on to say, Bhava balatina, by the strength of meditation. In the context, that implies by the strength of that Ananya-bhava. In other words, by the strength of the self-attentiveness, attending to nothing other than oneself, by that strength, Bhavanatita Satbhavatu Iritale. Being in Satbhava. Satbhava means the state of being which transcends bhavana. Bhavana in this context means any form of meditation that is a mental activity. In other words, meditating on anything other than ourselves, this state of being transcends that. Being in that state of being is parabhakti tattva. That is the nature or the reality of supreme devotion. So being self-attentive is supreme devotion to God. We just have to keep on trying. We all fail. We shouldn't let failure stop us persisting, because Bhagavan has made it clear, if we persevere, we will surely succeed. In the 10th paragraph, he says, however great a sinner one may be, if instead of lamenting, oh, I'm a sinner, how can I be saved? If one sets aside even the thought that one is a sinner and clings firmly to Swarupa Dhyana, self-attentiveness, one will certainly be reformed. So, however hopeless our situation may seem to be, we should persevere in trying. And regarding your son, Bhagavan already has a plan for him. Bhagavan knows what is best. If whatever difficulties are not arising randomly, whatever difficulties we face in life are difficulties given to us by Bhagavan for some purpose. So let us not be downhearted by all these difficulties. Let us do what has to be done. But let us not feel, I am doing this, I have to do this. Let us leave it to Bhagavan. Let him make us do whatever needs to be done, whether it's writing to politicians, meeting healthcare officials, whatever it may be. Take it as Bhagavan is doing all that. Bhagavan is making you do all that. You hold on to Bhagavan in your heart, where he's ever shining as eye. He will take care of everything.